COVID-19 hit the world like a storm in early 2020, and it has left a huge mark on our lives. The travel and tourism industry was thriving, but as COVID hit, many countries were placed into lockdown. This impacted the travel industry massively, as precautions such as social distancing was now law, and people were urged to stay at home unless they were classed as an essential key worker. But how exactly did they overcome it? And how did the public now feel regarding using public transport in a pandemic? Let's ask a few people about their stories and how COVID impacted them and their thoughts on travelling during a pandemic. Have you been impacted by the pandemic, and if so, how?
Yeah, I got COVID in July, just on my birthday. It wasn't pleasant. Luckily, I didn't lose my taste or smell, but I was really ill for quite a while, like about 4 days, and then I was fine. I was a bit groggy afterwards, but yeah, I would say I was infected, and then we had to isolate a couple of times due to family having to go to hospital for like surgeries and stuff. So like we couldn't work because we couldn't catch COVID, and they couldn't go to hospital with COVID. So yeah, we had to make sure they were with COVID free to go to hospital. So yeah.
In terms of, illness during the pandemic, I've had COVID once before, but I it didn't really affect me too bad. And anything else, it affected my job. Having to teach students from home, it was quite difficult. It made teaching a practical subject very challenging, and made something that normally comes quite naturally in the classroom setting. It made me have to think a lot more about it and how I could potentially deliver something that is hands-on and across a screen instead. So that caused initially quite a lot of stress. I got used to it quite quickly. So that's probably the biggest impact from the pandemic.
Did you have holiday plans before COVID, and if so, did you have to make any alterations to them?
We did, yeah. We wanted to go to Newquay. Our alternative was pushing it back a year, so we went this year instead of last year.
No, I didn't, but my mum and dad were going to go to somewhere abroad, I can't remember where, and it was meant to be 2019. Was it? I can't remember when COVID even started anymore. Anyway, when COVID started, they had a holiday in the summer. They couldn't go because of COVID. Then they got rescheduled to the year after, and then they couldn't make that because the COVID was still bad, and so now it's got rescheduled for the year after. It's a bit annoying when you expect to go on like abroad or on holiday abroad and you can't because of COVID. It's obviously understandable, but at the same time you got I think it led to a lot of people going on holidays in England to like your Butlins, your Havens, or just like Tattersalls and stuff like that. So I feel like it helped the economy with like more England-based holiday places. Probably would got more money through it than everyone choosing to go abroad. So I think there was good and bad to it.
I didn't actually book it, but I was planning on going abroad just before the first lockdown, but then obviously all the ships got locked down, so you couldn't really go anywhere.
So have you had to like rearrange or?
Yeah, still trying to sort it out now, but you still can't guarantee.
Holidays abroad were either cancelled or rescheduled as international flights had a dramatic decline when COVID hit. Flight Radar 24 had reported that the global air traffic fell from 15,012 flights on the 7th of March 2020 to just 5,275 in April 2020. Just in Europe alone, there was a decrease of 2,400 flights. Whilst travelling abroad wasn't an option for the UK, many had considered alternatives. According to Statistica research, 33% of people had already decided to use their annual leave on staycations within the UK as of May 2020. The next thing I set myself to find out was how often people travelled using public transport and their thoughts and feelings on the precautions put in place. Do you use public transport, and if so, how do you feel about it?
The last couple of weeks I've been on the trains, buses, taxis, so nearly every week I'll be travelling everywhere. So when COVID first somewhat started and we were isolating, and then we come out and we was allowed to work if you're an essential worker, I was catching the bus, but you're only allowed on the bus if you wore a face mask and you had to use contactless. You weren't allowed to pay with cash, or if you did, you weren't allowed to give them like your cash back, sort of stuff. So it was quite different, but it wasn't too bad. It just seemed like another requirement, and I didn't really think too much of it. It was just getting used to it all, I think. I travelled with Stagecoach on the buses, and apparently they cleaned all the buses and desanitized them every day, allegedly. And everyone wore face coverings, and everyone social distanced on the bus to an extent. So I felt quite safe. So yeah, I'd say it felt somewhat safe, yeah.
I used public transport most days. I use it to get to and from uni. Any time I need to go somewhere, I'll often use public transport. So I do feel very comfortable using it, as well as I feel comfortable with all the precautions they take. They made people wear masks. They also had They also had you give exact change, so you didn't get anything from the driver if he potentially had anything as well. So that was good.
I recently took a trip to Scotland to discover firsthand what it's like travelling on public transport during a pandemic. My journey had a rocky start as my first connecting train to York was delayed. However, things soon smoothed over as soon as I aboard. I managed to find a seat, and it soon came to my attention that the majority of the carriage was empty. This meant I had plenty of room to myself and needn't to worry about coming into contact with anybody else. I had 2 changeovers on my journey, and at each of the stations I had arrived at, there were multiple hand sanitising stations set up. This meant I was quickly able to clean my hands with no struggle. As of 19th July, England have lifted the mandatory face covering rule that was once set in place. However, I found that they were still common to wear amongst people, and all the train companies had recommended to wear one. Upon arriving in Scotland, the train conductor had stated over the tannoy to now wear a face covering, if not already, unless exempt. This is due to the rule still being mandatory within Scotland. With a recommendation and rule to wear a face covering upon the services in both countries, it had helped bring a sense of calm to my mind. Once arriving in Scotland, I had also used their bus services to travel to and from. I had soon learnt that contactless payment is used the most, and that they even accept both Google and Apple Pay as forms of payment too. This was familiar to me, as it is also set in place in England. After locating a seat, I had noticed that there was multiple signage on board. They had stated things such as encouragement of the face covering rule, reminders to sanitise often, keep a safe distance from yourself and other passengers, and reassurance of deep and enhanced cleaning upon the buses. It had also come to my attention that multiple windows were kept open in order to ensure good ventilation and fresh air. Multiple transport and travel companies are placing enough protection to ensure their customers have a safe and easy journey with their best intents at heart. So, how exactly is the travel and tourism industry overcoming the pandemic? They're banding together by applying similar, if not the same rules, to guarantee everybody's safety. With these rules set in place across different modes of public transport, I feel it is more than safe enough to travel in these times.